It was just before midnight, 11:52 p.m. to be exact, when the glow of my phone's screen sliced through the darkness of my bedroom. I was wide awake. I rarely slept soundly in that house, a place where peace felt like a borrowed commodity. I reached for the phone, my eyes stinging from the sudden burst of light. It was a notification from my banking app. Transfer initiated. $80,000 moved to the Tuscan Bloom Wedding Fund. I just stared at the screen, my mind refusing to process the words. I blinked once, twice, expecting a glitch, a mistake, but the digital text remained, cold and absolute. That sum wasn't just an abstract number. It was 6 years of working double shifts. It was every skipped vacation, every meal I cooked at home instead of eating out. It was my master's degree in architecture. It was my ticket out. My parents hadn't bothered to ask. There was no warning call, no gentle heads up. They had simply taken my entire future and wired it to my sister's account because she decided she wanted a second, more extravagant wedding in Italy. I slowly sat up, the edge of the mattress cool against my legs. The house was utterly silent. Down the hall, my parents were likely asleep, wrapped in high thread count sheets, dreaming of vineyard tours and designer gowns. They probably anticipated a scene in the morning. They expected tears, followed by a lecture where they'd calmly explain their reasoning until I backed down, just like always. But this time, the tears didn't come. A profound, icy calm washed over me, a feeling far heavier and more solid than simple anger. I looked at the phone's blue-tinged light and whispered into the quiet room, "This is it. This is the day I stop being your safety net." Before we get into what happened next, do me a favor and hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. The following morning, the sky over Boston was a dull, bruised purple. A cold drizzle was falling, the kind that slicks the roads and makes the city feel grim. I was parked across the street from my parents' home in Beacon Hill, my hands clenched so tightly around the steering wheel that my knuckles were bone white. I killed the engine, and the sudden silence in the car felt deafening. I looked up at the brick townhouse. It was historic, elegant, with black shutters and a perfectly polished brass door knocker. It was the kind of house that tourists took pictures of, a symbol of old money and quiet prestige. Inside, I knew the floors were original hardwood, polished to a mirror sheen. I knew the kitchen had been remodeled with marble countertops imported from Carrara. I knew my parents cherished this house, its history, its status, more than almost anything. And I knew, with a certainty that settled like a stone in my gut, that last night they had plundered my savings to maintain their perfect image and fund my sister's fantasy. I hadn't brought a bag or even a coat. I just got out of the car, the chilly rain instantly soaking my sweater, and walked to the front door. My key still worked. It was an old, ornate skeleton key on a simple silver ring. I unlocked the door and stepped into the foyer. The smell hit me first, a mix of potpourri, lemon oil, and freshly brewed espresso. It was the scent of comfortable wealth. My mother, Eleanor, was in the formal living room, standing over a set of brand-new cream-colored suitcases. She was carefully folding a cashmere shawl, her movements precise and unhurried. "Oh, Clara," she said, her eyes not leaving her task. "You're here a bit early. Came to wish us bon voyage? Our flight leaves in a few hours." My father, Robert, was at his mahogany desk in the corner, tapping away at his laptop. He wore a crisp, button-down shirt, looking composed and completely untroubled, like a man who had never faced a real problem in his life. I stood just inside the door, dripping rainwater onto their pristine Persian rug. I felt out of place, insignificant, but a fire was building in my chest. I didn't come to say goodbye, I said, my voice surprisingly level. I was almost impressed by how steady I sounded. I came to find out why my savings account has been drained. My mother paused for a fraction of a second. Then she picked up a leather-bound book and tucked it into a side pocket of the suitcase. "Don't be so dramatic, Clara," she said dismissively. "It's not drained. Your checking account is untouched. You have plenty for your monthly bills." "You took my savings," I stated, not as a question but as a fact. "The grad school fund. Every last cent of it, $80,000. My father finally looked up, peeling off his reading glasses with an air of profound irritation, as if I were a telemarketer interrupting his dinner. "It was a bridge loan, Clara," he said, his tone deep and condescending. "Sophie needed to secure the venue in Tuscany. The wedding planner was putting on the pressure. You know how much stress your sister has been under." "Sophie is 31 years old," I shot back, "and she's already married. This is a vow renewal. It's a party." "It's a celebration of their commitment," my mother corrected me sharply, walking over to the espresso machine. "And Leo has had a slight, temporary dip in his latest venture. They just needed some support. Family helps family, dear." "I needed that money for my master's program," I said, the words feeling heavy and useless in the air. "I've been saving for 6 years. I worked nights. I drove a 10-year-old car with no air conditioning through 6 summers to save that money." My father let out an exasperated sigh and massaged his temples. "You're young, you're resourceful, you're a talented architect. Well, a drafter for now. You'll make it back." I just stared at him, unable to believe what I was hearing. "Make it back?" "Yes," he said, waving his hand as if swatting an annoying gnat. "You have no children, no mortgage. Your overhead is low. You'll have it back in a year, 2 at most. Sophie needs this now. It's simply a matter of timing." "It took me 6 years," I repeated, my voice barely a whisper. "And you think I can just replace it in a year?" "If you apply yourself," he said coolly. "Stop being so focused on the pennies, Clara, and look at the bigger picture. We raised you to be self-sufficient. Sophie is more sensitive. She requires a different kind of support." And there it was. The unspoken family doctrine laid bare. Sophie was the delicate orchid, needing the perfect conditions to bloom. I was the sturdy cactus, expected to thrive in the desert, and because I could survive, they felt justified in taking my water. "Did you even consider asking me?" I asked, my voice rising slightly. "Did the thought of calling me before you liquidated my account ever cross your minds?" "We have access," my mother said, her tone turning to ice. "We co-signed on that account when you were 16 to help you manage your money. It's always been a family account." "It was my money," I insisted. "I earned it." "And who paid for your private high school?" my mother snapped back. "Who covered your undergraduate degree? We have invested a significant amount in you, Clara. Don't be so petty. It's an ugly trait." Petty. They had just detonated my entire life plan to throw a party in Italy, and I was being petty. I looked around the perfectly curated room, at the expensive oil paintings, the designer luggage, at my own parents, so healthy and wealthy, telling me my life's work was disposable because my sister needed to feel special. They didn't see me. They saw an asset, a resource they could tap into at will, and in that moment, I knew with chilling certainty they would never pay me back. If I asked in a year, Sophie would need a down payment for a house, or Dad would need a new car, or Mom would decide they deserved a cruise. My needs would always be at the bottom of the list. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the old skeleton key. My mother's eyes locked onto it, narrowing in suspicion. What are you doing? I walked over to the antique console table in the foyer. It was made of dark, polished cherry wood. I placed the key right in the center. It made a sharp, definitive click against the wood. "I'm done," I said. "Done with what?" my father asked, his patience clearly gone. "Don't have a tantrum, Clara. We have a plane to catch." "I'm done being the emergency fund," I clarified. "I'm done being the bank." "You are being absolutely ridiculous," my mother said, taking a step toward me. "Pick up that key. We'll expect you for dinner on Sunday when we return. We'll bring you back a souvenir." "I don't want a souvenir," I said, turning for the door. "I wanted my education." "If you walk out that door," my father's voice rose, laced with a threat, "don't think for a second we'll come running when you change your mind. You're behaving like a spoiled child." "No," I said, pulling the heavy door open. The rain was coming down harder now. A child expects their parents to fix their problems. I'm going to fix this myself. "Clara," my mother yelled, "we are your family. You don't just turn your back on your family." I looked back at them one last time. They looked furious, but mostly they looked bewildered. They genuinely couldn't comprehend why I was upset. They believed they were entitled to me. "Family doesn't steal from each other," I said. "So I guess I'm not family anymore." I stepped out into the rain and pulled the door shut. The deadbolt clicked into place. It was the loudest, most liberating sound I had ever heard. I got back into my car, my body finally starting to shake as the adrenaline wore off. Reality was crashing in. I was 27 years old. I had $1,400 in my checking account. My savings were gone. My tuition payment was due in 3 weeks. I sat there for what felt like an eternity, watching the rain smear the view of the stately townhouse until it was just a blurry, distorted shape. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I felt something else entirely. I felt light. For my entire life, I had been carrying the crushing weight of their expectations. I had tried so hard to be the responsible one, the easy one, the one who never asked for anything. I thought if I was just good enough, they would finally see me, respect me. I thought if I built my own success, they would be proud. But they weren't proud. They were just entitled. I put the car into drive and pulled away from the curb. I didn't even glance at the rearview mirror. My first stop was a small bank branch downtown. It was a drab place with worn-out carpeting that smelled vaguely of dust and old paper. I sat across from a young banker named Jessica, who looked as tired as I felt. "How can I help you today, Ms. Hayes?" she asked politely. "I need to close my savings account," I said, "and I need to remove my parents as authorized users on my checking account, right now." Jessica typed for a moment, her brow furrowed. "I see there was a large transfer made from the savings account last night. The balance is 0. "I know," I said. "Close it anyway." "Okay," she said, giving me a sympathetic look. "And for the checking account, your father is listed as a co-owner. To remove him, we would technically need his signature." My heart hammered against my ribs. "He's leaving the country in a few hours. I can't get it." Jessica looked at me, really looked at me, and must have seen the sheer panic in my eyes. Or maybe she just saw a woman who looked like she'd been through a storm. "Actually," she said, lowering her voice, "as you're over 18 and the primary account holder, there is another way. We can't remove him without his consent, but you can close this account entirely and open a brand new one solely in your name. We can do it right now." "Do it," I said, a wave of relief washing over me. "Please." It took the better part of an hour. I moved my paltry $1,400 into a new account that was mine and mine alone. I got a new debit card, a generic blue piece of plastic that felt like a shield. "Is there anything else?" Jessica asked as she handed it to me. "Yes," I said. "If Robert or Eleanor Hayes attempt to get any information about me, my accounts, my address, anything, what happens?" "They will be denied access," Jessica said firmly. "They have absolutely no authority over this new account. You are firewalled." "Thank you," I said, the words feeling inadequate. I walked out of the bank and sank onto a nearby bench. I pulled out my phone. 6 missed calls from my mother. 4 texts from my sister, Sophie. "Sophie, Mom said you threw a fit. Why do you always have to be so jealous? This is my special day." "Sophie, pick up the phone. You're ruining the mood for everyone." "Mother, we're at the airport. You owe your father an apology. He is deeply hurt." I didn't reply. I navigated to my contacts. I scrolled down through the names. Block. I did it for my mother. I did it for my father. I did it for Sophie. Then, for good measure, I did it for Leo, my brother-in-law. My phone went silent. It was a terrifying, exhilarating silence. My whole life, that phone had been a leash. My mother calling to critique my outfit. My father calling to question my career choices. Sophie calling to complain about some trivial inconvenience. Now, there was just the hum of city traffic and the steady patter of rain. I went back to my tiny studio apartment. I couldn't afford it anymore. My job as a junior drafter at a large firm barely covered the rent, and without my tuition savings, I needed every last dollar just to survive. I couldn't stay. I had to disappear. I spent the next 3 days in a frenzy of packing and selling. My comfortable sofa went for $250 on Facebook Marketplace. My small dining set, $75. I sold the designer handbags my mother had given me for birthdays, gifts I never liked because they felt like costumes. I took them to a consignment shop and walked out with $500 in cash. I broke my lease. My landlord was furious, but I told him there was a sudden family emergency. It wasn't even a lie. The emergency was my family. I packed what was left of my life into my beat-up car. It wasn't much. My professional drafting table, my laptop, 3 boxes of textbooks, 1 suitcase of clothes, and my coffee maker. I drove west. I had no destination in mind, no real plan. I just knew I had to get out of Boston. Boston was their city. Their name was on plaques in museums and charity event programs. I couldn't walk a block without feeling their shadow. I ended up in Philadelphia. It was a 5-hour drive, far enough that I wouldn't accidentally run into them at a cafe, but close enough that it didn't feel like I'd moved to another planet. I found a listing on a fringe website for a live work space in a gritty industrial neighborhood. I met the landlord, a man named Sal, with permanently grease-stained hands that evening. "It ain't the Four Seasons," Sal grunted, sliding open a heavy, corrugated metal door. It was a repurposed industrial container unit, a literal steel box. Someone had crudely cut a window into one side and welded iron bars over it. Inside, the floor was bare, stained concrete. A tiny kitchenette, looking like it was pulled from an old RV, was shoved into one corner. The bathroom was a small closet containing a toilet and a shower head jutting directly from the wall. The space was cold and cavernous. It smelled of rust and damp concrete. "How much?" I asked. $700 a month, Sal said. "All utilities included, but just so you know, the heater sounds like a jet engine." "I'll take it," I said, handing him the cash for the first month and the deposit. That night, I inflated my air mattress on the cold concrete floor. The heater roared to life with a series of clanks and groans sounding like a dying dragon. The orange glow from a nearby street lamp filtered through the barred window, casting strange, elongated shadows on the metal walls. I ate a can of cold tomato soup because I hadn't unpacked my hot plate. I opened my laptop and saw the inevitable email from the university. Subject: tuition payment overdue. Please contact the bursar's office to avoid cancellation of your enrollment. I snapped the laptop shut. I wasn't going to grad school. Not this semester. Maybe not ever. I lay down on the mattress, pulling a thin blanket up to my chin. The cold was seeping up from the floor. I could see my own breath misting in the air. I thought about my parents, probably sipping champagne in a Tuscan villa by now. They were likely recounting the story of my tantrum, laughing at how emotional and dramatic I was. They were sleeping in a luxury hotel suite that cost more per night than I had to my name. They thought they had won. They thought they had put me back in my place, that I would come crawling back within a week, begging for forgiveness and a loan. I stared up at the ridged metal ceiling. No, I whispered to the empty, echoing space. I wasn't going back. I was alone. I was broke. I was living in a metal box in an industrial wasteland. But for the first time in my 27 years, I was completely, utterly my own. The silence in that container wasn't empty anymore. It was a blank slate, waiting for me to draw on it. I closed my eyes, listening to the rain drumming a steady rhythm on the roof. It sounded like applause. My new existence didn't look like a life. It looked like a temporary storage solution. My container was painted a faded, peeling blue on the outside. Inside, it was a world of gray, corrugated metal. I couldn't hang pictures with nails, so I bought a pack of strong magnets to stick up my architectural sketches. That first month was a trial by fire. Philadelphia was cold and damp, a dampness that seemed to permeate the steel walls. My clothes always felt slightly clammy. The heater Sal had mentioned was a monstrous industrial unit that blasted hot, dusty air that smelled like burning plastic. I only used it when my fingers went numb. My new alarm clock was the 5 a.m. shift change at the warehouse next door. The persistent, high-pitched beep of reversing forklifts became the soundtrack to my mornings. I developed a Spartan routine. I'd boil water on my single hot plate for instant coffee, a bitter, gritty brew I drank from a chipped mug I'd found at a thrift store. Then I would sit at my drafting table. It was the one piece of furniture I had saved, a professional-grade maple table that was my sanctuary. It dominated the tiny space, forcing me to sidle past it to get to the bathroom. But when I was sitting there, I wasn't a girl living in a box. I was an architect. I had no clients and no firm, so I scoured freelance websites, bidding on the small, undesirable jobs, drafting a floor plan for a home renovation, $200, converting a set of old PDF blueprints to a modern CAD file, $75, designing a new deck for a suburban house, $250. I took every single one. I worked from dawn until long after dusk, my back aching and my eyes stinging from the glare of the laptop screen in the dim light. One afternoon, about a month after I'd fled Boston, I hit a wall. I was eating a sad lunch of saltine crackers and peanut butter. I was exhausted, bone-deep lonely, and hadn't had a real conversation with anyone in days, save for a brief exchange with a grocery store clerk. On a masochistic impulse, I pulled out my phone. I had created a ghost account on social media. No name, no friends, just so I could watch them from a distance. I knew it was a terrible idea, like picking at a wound that was trying to heal. I navigated to my sister Sophie's profile. A new photo album had been posted just a few hours earlier. The cover photo was of Sophie and my parents in Tuscany. The sky behind them was a brilliant, cloudless blue. They were seated at a long, rustic table draped in white linen and overflowing with flowers. Sophie was radiant in a delicate lace dress that I knew cost at least $4,000. holding a glass of Prosecco and laughing, her head tilted back in performative joy. My mother sat beside her, tan and smiling serenely. My father had his arm around Leo, my brother-in-law, both of them looking proud and triumphant. They looked like a royal family on holiday. The caption read, "Making memories with the ones who matter most. Family is forever. Tuscan dreams, vow renewal blessed." I stared at the photo. Then I looked around my steel box. I saw the faint rust stains on the concrete floor. I saw my damp socks hanging from a clothesline I'd strung across the room. I saw the single, buzzing, fluorescent light strip overhead. They were toasting with my tuition money. They were celebrating their forever family while I was shivering in an industrial park. A hot lump formed in my throat. I wanted to smash my phone against the metal wall, but I didn't. Instead, I zoomed in on the picture. I looked past their smiling faces to the villa behind them. I studied its roof line, the arches, the way the stone columns supported the veranda. That's a poorly designed cantilever, I thought, my mind automatically shifting into professional mode. The drainage is all wrong for that kind of roof. They're going to have major water damage within a decade. I turned off the phone and set it face down. They have the money, I said to the empty room, but I have the skill. I finished my crackers, brushed the crumbs from my drafting table, and got back to work. I started sketching, not for a client, but for myself. I looked around my ugly little container. It was cramped and cold, but it was also efficient. It was modular, it was strong. I started drawing plans to improve it. I sketched out a design for a fold-down Murphy bed to create more floor space. I drew a small skylight to let in natural light. I designed a clever rainwater collection and filtration system for the roof. A realization dawned on me as I drew. When you have nothing, you are forced to be creative. When you have limitless resources like my parents, you just buy solutions. You don't have to innovate. You just consume. Here in this box, I had to solve problems. I wasn't just surviving, I was in training. 4 months later, the relentless cold finally broke. Spring came to Philadelphia. I had managed to scrape together $3,500. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough to buy proper insulation panels for the container. I installed them myself, watching online tutorials and learning to use a power drill and a caulking gun. My hands became calloused and perpetually smudged with dirt. I'd cut myself more than once, but I just wrapped the wound in electrical tape and kept going. I had also made a friend. His name was Daniel, and he ran a small nonprofit called Safe Harbor Communities. I met him at a local coffee shop where I'd been nursing a single coffee for hours to use the free Wi-Fi. He noticed the blueprint spread across my table and asked what I was designing. "Nothing really," I said. "Just ideas." "We need ideas," he said with a warm smile. "We have a small plot of land down by the river. We want to build transitional housing for at-risk youth, kids who have aged out of the foster system. The problem is, we have virtually no budget." "I know a thing or two about no budget," I replied. He hired me. The pay was minimal, but he offered me something far more valuable: a chance. The project was called The Nexus. The concept was simple but powerful. We would use repurposed industrial containers, just like the one I was living in, and transform them into a small village of safe, dignified, and efficient micro-homes. I threw myself into the design. I poured every lesson I had learned from my own Spartan existence into the plans. I knew exactly where to place the windows to maximize natural light and minimize heat loss. I knew how to insulate the floors to keep out the biting cold. I knew how to make 180 square feet feel not just livable, but like a home, I worked 18-hour days. I was the lead architect, but I was also the project manager and a de facto construction consultant. I was on site every day, wearing steel-toed boots and a hard hat, watching as cranes lifted the containers into place like giant, colorful Lego bricks. 6 months into the project, we hit a major roadblock. The city inspector, a notoriously difficult old-timer, had rejected our electrical grid proposal twice, citing concerns about the unconventional structures. I went down to the city planning office myself, my heart pounding. I unrolled the plans on his cluttered desk. "It works," I told him, pointing to my load calculations. "I've lived in one of these for 10 months. I know the airflow dynamics. I know the thermal properties. I know the fire safety requirements because I had to meet them myself." He studied the plans, then looked up at me, his gaze taking in the exhaustion in my eyes and the calluses on my hands. "You're not just the designer, are you, kid?" he asked. "I'm the resident expert," I said. He took a heavy stamp, inked it, and brought it down on the paper with a satisfying thud. Approved. I walked out of that building clutching the permit like it was a winning lottery ticket. At the bottom of the page, it listed the architect of record, Clara Hayes. It was official. I had been studying at night, poring over licensing exam materials by the light of a battery-powered lantern while eating instant noodles. I had logged the hours. I had done the work. I was a licensed architect. I bought a cheap plastic frame from a dollar store and hung that permit on my metal wall with a magnet. It was the most beautiful thing I owned. When the Nexus opened, it caused a local sensation. It wasn't just housing, it was a statement. The containers were painted in bold, optimistic colors: sunshine yellow, deep teal, and vibrant orange. We had built a community garden in the central courtyard. Solar panels on the roofs made the project nearly self-sufficient. The local news station came to do a story. They interviewed Daniel, and he insisted on pulling me in front of the camera. "This is the visionary who made it all happen," he said, putting an arm around my shoulders. Clara Hayes. I was wearing my dusty work boots and a plaid flannel shirt, my hair pulled back in a messy knot. I had no makeup on. "I just wanted to build something that mattered," I mumbled to the reporter. The story went unexpectedly viral. Architect turns shipping containers into hope for Philly's youth. My phone started ringing. At first it was small commissions, homeowners wanting a stylish backyard office. Then a small developer from New York called, then a restaurant group. I incorporated my own firm. I called it Keystone Design. I didn't rent a fancy office. I stayed right there in my container. I liked the reminder. I liked waking up to the sound of industry. It kept me hungry. One rainy Tuesday in October, almost exactly 1 year after I walked out of my parents' house, I received an email. Subject: Proposal Request, the Green Spire Project. It was from a consortium of tech investors in San Francisco. They had seen the news story about the Nexus. They wanted to build a revolutionary net-zero energy office campus in the heart of Boston. The estimated budget was $5 million. I stared at the number on the screen, $5 million. I had to read the email 4 times to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. The email stated they weren't looking for a big, established firm. They wanted someone with a genuinely sustainable and human-centric vision. They wanted me. I replied simply, "I can be in Boston next week." I drove my old car, the one with the broken heater, back to the city I had fled. But this time, I wore a new, sharply tailored suit I had bought with my own money. I walked into a sleek top-floor boardroom. 5 men in expensive dark suits were seated around a glass table. I could feel their skepticism. I was young, I was a woman, and I was unknown. I stood at the head of the table. My hands didn't shake. My voice didn't waver. I don't design monuments to corporate egos, I began. I design living ecosystems. I build places that give back more than they take. If you want a trophy building, a glass box to put on a magazine cover, there are a dozen other firms you can call. If you want to build the future, you call me. The room was dead silent. Then, the lead investor, a man with sharp eyes, broke into a slow smile. We want the future. They signed the contract that day. I walked out of that skyscraper and onto the bustling streets of Boston. It was drizzling, just like the day I had left, but the rain no longer felt cold and oppressive. It felt cleansing. I got to my car and my phone buzzed. It was a notification from my bank. Deposit received, $250,000. It was the initial design retainer. I sat in the driver's seat and just looked at the number. It was more than 3 times what my parents had taken from me. I let out a short, quiet laugh. I had done it. I had earned it all back, and then some. And I didn't owe a single word of thanks to anyone but myself. I started the car and began the drive back to Philadelphia. I had a campus to design. I had no idea that while I was meticulously building my new life, the foundations of theirs were turning to dust. I didn't know the silence from my family wasn't contentment. It was the quiet before a collapse. 6 months after I signed the Greenspire contract, I was sitting in my office. I still worked out of the industrial park, but now Keystone Design occupied a stack of 3 containers, cleverly connected and modified. I had a team of 4 junior architects and an office manager. It was another Tuesday, and rain was hammering on the metal roof, but inside it was warm, bright, and humming with productivity. My accountant, Maria Vance, walked in. Maria was a no-nonsense woman who usually communicated in spreadsheets and monosyllables. Today, she looked rattled. She was clutching a thick file, and her hand was visibly trembling. "Clara," she said, her voice strained. "We have a problem. I found something when I was finalizing the legal separation of your finances from your parents." I put down my pen. "What is it? Did they try to claim me as a dependent on their taxes again?" "No," Maria said, sinking into the chair opposite my desk. "It's much, much worse than that." She opened the file. It was filled with public records, liens, and default notices. I did a comprehensive audit to ensure none of their liabilities could ever be tied to your company, she explained, her voice low. "And I found all of this." She pushed a document across the desk. It was a notice of lien against my parents' historic house in Beacon Hill. "They took out a second mortgage?" I asked, confused. "That house was paid off decades ago." "Not just a second mortgage," Maria said, her expression grim. "A third, and they maxed out a home equity line of credit. Clara, they leveraged everything. The house, their stock portfolio, their vacation home in Nantucket. All of it." I stared at the dizzying numbers. It was millions of dollars in debt. "Why?" I whispered. "My father is the most risk-averse man I know." "He wasn't the one taking the risk," Maria said softly. "Leo was." "Leo?" I asked, my blood running cold. "My brother-in-law?" "Look at this," Maria said, pointing to another document. It was a power of attorney form, granting Leo Price full authority to manage the assets of Robert and Eleanor Hayes for the purpose of aggressive portfolio diversification. "Leo convinced them he was a financial genius," I murmured, the pieces clicking into place. "He told them he could make them richer." "A high-risk offshore real estate venture in Panama," Maria said, shaking her head. "He sank nearly all of their liquid capital into it. He promised them exorbitant returns within a year." I closed my eyes, and I could hear Leo's booming voice at family dinners, bragging about disrupting the market and paradigm shifts. I could see my parents hanging on his every word, calling him their brilliant son. And? I asked, my eyes still closed. The development company was a shell corporation, Maria said bluntly. It was a Ponzi scheme. The founders vanished last month. The entire investment is gone, worthless. Completely? Completely, she affirmed. Your parents have lost over 90% of their net worth. And because they used the house as collateral for the loans, they're completely underwater. The bank has already initiated foreclosure proceedings. I leaned back in my chair. The only sound in the office was the quiet whir of a server fan. I waited to feel a surge of triumph, a rush of vindication. I had fantasized about this moment, about karma finally catching up with them. But I felt nothing of the sort. I just felt sick. It wasn't just about the money. It was the sheer, staggering foolishness of it. They had handed their entire life's work over to a flashy charlatan who talked a big game. They had given him the keys to their kingdom without a second thought. But when I, their own daughter, had needed my own money for my own future, they had treated me like a child asking for a handout. "Does Leo have any money left?" I asked. "No," Maria said. "He and Sophie both declared bankruptcy last week. Their assets are protected. Your parents are the ones left holding the bag for all the debt." "What about Sophie?" "Her name is on the bankruptcy filing," Maria said. "She's in the clear, legally speaking." I looked out the window at the rain-streaked industrial yard. "They're going to lose the house," I said, stating the obvious. "Yes," Maria confirmed. "The auction is scheduled in 60 days. I thought of that perfect brick townhouse, the polished brass, the quiet elegance. I thought of my mother, who treated her antique furniture with more reverence than she ever treated me." "They don't know that I know this," I said. "No," Maria said. "These are public records, but you'd have to be looking for them. They're probably trying to keep it a secret to maintain appearances." "They must be terrified," I mused. "They are desperate," Maria corrected, "and desperate people do foolish things." I stood and walked to the window, pressing my palm against the cool metal wall of my office. "Thank you, Maria," I said. She got up to leave. "Clara, if they call you—" "I know," I interrupted. "Don't sign anything. Don't even answer the phone," she advised, and then she was gone. I stood there alone with the rain and the hum of my company. I looked at my framed architect's license on the wall. Clara Hayes, architect. I had built a life on a foundation of scrap metal and sheer will. It wasn't glamorous, but it was solid. It was built to withstand a storm. My parents had built their life on a foundation of image and entitlement. And now the ground was washing out from under them. I didn't call them. I didn't text. I just went back to my desk. I had a campus to build. 2 months later was the groundbreaking ceremony for the Green Spire project. It was a major event for the city of Boston. The mayor was there, along with a swarm of press and 100 VIPs in expensive suits, all huddled under a massive white tent to avoid the persistent drizzle. I was standing near the stage, wearing a hard hat and a bright yellow safety vest over my blazer. I wasn't an anonymous employee this time. I was the keynote speaker. The construction site was a chaotic expanse of mud and heavy machinery, but to me, it was the most beautiful sight in the world. It was a beginning. As I was reviewing my notes, I felt a tentative tap on my shoulder. I turned. It was my mother. For a split second, I didn't recognize her. She looked diminished. Her perfectly coiffed blonde hair showed dark roots. Her designer coat, though expensive, was wrinkled and looked a size too big for her now thinner frame. My father stood just behind her. He looked a decade older. His shoulders were slumped and he wasn't wearing a tie, which for him was the equivalent of being naked in public. "Clara," my mother said, her voice thin and fragile, like old paper. I just stared at them. "What are you doing here? This is a private event." "We saw the signs out front," my father mumbled, gesturing vaguely toward the construction fence. "We saw the name of the project. We thought, maybe you were working here." They had no idea. They saw a massive construction site and assumed I had landed a job as a low-level drafter. "I am working here," I said evenly. "Oh, good," my mother said, attempting a smile that was more of a grimace. "That's wonderful. We're so proud of you, sweetheart, landing on your feet." She reached out to touch my arm, a gesture of hollow affection. I instinctively took a step back. "What do you want?" I asked bluntly. My father moved closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper as he glanced around. "We're in a bit of a situation, Clara. A temporary cash flow problem." "A cash flow problem," I repeated, the phrase tasting like ash in my mouth. "Is that what you're calling it?" "It's very complicated," he said, waving his hand dismissively. "High-level finance, market fluctuations. You wouldn't understand the specifics, but we need a small bridge loan, just for a few weeks, to cover some urgent expenses." "How much?" I asked, my voice flat. My mother swallowed hard. $30,000, just until some other funds are released. $30,000. A year and a half ago, they had taken $80,000 from me without a second thought. Now they were here, begging for less than half that amount. "Why don't you ask Leo?" I asked, watching his face. The name hit him like a physical blow. He flinched. "Leo is not in a position to help." "And Sophie?" "Sophie is a wreck," my mother whispered, her eyes welling up with tears. "She can't stop crying. They repossessed her car, Clara. They took her BMW yesterday." I looked at them, truly looked at them. They were pathetic. Stripped of their arrogance and their money, there was nothing left but two scared, greedy people standing in the mud. "You want me to lend you money?" I said. "We'll pay you back," my father insisted, his voice cracking. "With interest. We just need you to co-sign on a personal loan. You have a good job now, a steady income." The bank said if we just had a co-signer with a solid credit history. They wanted my name. The name they had belittled. The reputation I had built from nothing. They wanted to use my hard-won stability to prop up their collapsing world. "You think I have a steady income?" I asked. "Well, look at you," my mother said, gesturing at my safety vest as if it were a royal robe. "You're on a huge project. You must be doing well for yourself. Family helps family, Clara. You remember that, don't you?" That phrase again, it made my stomach clench. "I remember," I said, my voice like ice. "I remember you saying that right after you emptied my bank account." "That was different," my mother pleaded. "We were trying to give your sister a beautiful memory. We never thought this would happen. You gambled," I said, "and you lost." "Please," my father begged, his eyes glistening. "They're going to change the locks on the house this Friday. We'll have nowhere to go." "I lived in a shipping container for 10 months, I said coolly. "I know what it's like to have nowhere to go. It's character building." Just then, the event music swelled, and the mayor stepped up to the podium. "Ladies and gentlemen," her voice boomed across the site, "please join me in welcoming the visionary force behind this incredible project, the CEO and lead architect of Keystone Design, Ms. Clara Hayes." The crowd erupted in applause. The sound was a physical force. My parents froze. Their heads snapped toward the stage, then back to me. My father's jaw went slack. My mother looked as if she had just seen a ghost. "CEO?" my mother whispered, the word catching in her throat. "Lead architect?" my father stammered. I squared my shoulders and looked them both directly in the eye. "I'm not an employee," I said calmly, letting the words land. "I own the company." The color drained from their faces. For the first time, they seemed to actually see the giant banners hanging behind the stage, the ones they had walked right past. Keystone Design, Clara Hayes, principal. They had come here to beg for scraps from the person who was hosting the banquet. "Clara," my father said, his voice instantly changing. The desperate plea was gone, replaced by a raw, hungry avarice. "Clara, my God, you built this?" "I did," I said. "Then you can help us?" My mother shrieked, her eyes widening with a wild, frantic hope. "You have money. You must have millions. You can just write us a check. You can save the house." She lunged for my arm again, her grip surprisingly strong, her nails digging into my blazer. "You have to," she hissed. "We're your parents." I looked down at her claw-like hand on my sleeve, then at the mud splattering her expensive shoes. "I have to go," I said, pulling my arm free. "They're waiting for me." "Clara!" my father shouted as I turned away. "Don't you walk away from us. We made you. We raised you." "You didn't make me," I said, not looking back. "You broke me, and I put myself back together." I walked toward the stage. "Security!" I called out, my voice clear and authoritative. Two large men in black suits who had been discreetly watching the exchange stepped forward. "These people are not on the guest list," I said, pointing to my parents without turning around. "Please escort them from the premises." "Clara, no!" my mother screamed. "You can't do this to us." "I'm the owner of this site," I said to the guards. "Get them out." The security guards moved in. One took my father firmly by the elbow, the other stood in my mother's path. "Ma'am, sir, you need to come with us," one said politely but firmly. "That's my daughter," my mother shrieked, her voice cracking with hysteria. "She owes us everything." I didn't look back. I walked steadily toward the stage stairs, hearing their shouts fade behind me. I heard my mother start to sob. I heard my father threatening to sue everyone, but as I climbed the steps to the podium, their desperate cries were swallowed by the rising tide of applause from the crowd. I stepped up to the microphone. I looked out at the sea of expectant faces. I saw the Boston skyline behind them, a city I was now reshaping. I saw the future I was building right here on this muddy ground. At the edge of the site, my parents were being led away like common trespassers. I was standing in the spotlight. I took a deep, steadying breath. "Thank you all for being here," I said, my voice ringing with confidence. "Today, we're not just breaking ground on a building. We're committing to an idea. The idea that what we build should be resilient, that it should be built on a strong foundation. Because without a strong foundation, everything, no matter how beautiful it looks on the surface, will eventually collapse." I paused, letting the weight of the words sink in. I knew exactly what they meant. "Now," I said, a small smile playing on my lips, "let's get to work." After the speech, I stepped off the stage into a flurry of handshakes and congratulations. My heart was pounding with adrenaline. The investors were ecstatic. "Brilliant speech, Clara," one of them said, clapping me on the back. "Loved the part about foundations. Powerful." I took a glass of sparkling water, my hands perfectly steady. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a text from Maria, my accountant. "Foreclosure auction for the Beacon Hill property is confirmed for next Tuesday. Do you want me to place a bid?" I stared at the message. I could buy their house. I had the capital. It would be the ultimate crushing revenge. I could evict them and turn their precious shrine to the past into my new corporate headquarters. I typed back a single word. "No." Then I added, "Let it go." I didn't want their house. It was a tomb of bad memories. It was poisoned. I walked to the edge of the construction site. The security guards stood by the gate. My parents were gone from the property, but I saw my father's car parked across the street, a ticket already tucked under the windshield wiper. He was slumped over in the driver's seat, his head resting on the steering wheel. My mother was staring out her window, her gaze fixed on the steel skeleton of my building rising into the gray sky. I walked over to the chain-link fence. I didn't open it. My father saw me and got out of the car. All the fight was gone. He just looked defeated. "Clara," he said, his voice hoarse from across the street, "we have nowhere to go." I pulled my tablet from my bag, opened the file Maria had sent, and held it up, the screen glowing through the fence. "I know," I said. "I saw the foreclosure notice." He squinted at the screen. "You knew?" "My accountant is very thorough," I said. "It's over, Dad. The bank owns the house now. You're just trespassing in your own life." My mother got out of the car, her face a mask of hatred and disbelief. "You enjoyed this," she spat. "You loved humiliating us." "I didn't enjoy it," I said, and it was the honest truth. "I just didn't care. There's a difference." I looked at the two of them, shivering in the drizzle. "I'm not giving you money," I said, my voice final, "because if I do, you'll just give it to Leo or Sophie. Or you'll lease an expensive car you can't afford to keep up appearances. I'm not funding your delusion anymore." "So you're just going to let us be homeless?" my mother cried. "I'm letting you figure it out," I said, just like I had to. I turned and walked back toward the warmth and light of the tent. "You are a monster, Clara," she screamed at my back. "A cruel, heartless monster." I kept walking. I wasn't a monster. I was an architect. And sometimes you have to demolish a condemned structure before you can build something new and strong in its place. The collapse was swift. The bank took the house. I heard later that my mother had staged a sit-in, refusing to leave the living room until the sheriff's deputies physically removed her. Leo was arrested for fraud and embezzlement. His face, once smug and confident, was now a grim mugshot on the front page of the Boston Globe. Sophie, I almost felt sorry for. Almost. She'd never held a real job. Her art history degree was purely decorative. At 31, her only marketable skill was spending other people's money. She ended up in a dingy one-bedroom apartment in a distant suburb. I saw her once, months later. I was meeting a client in a downtown coffee shop. She was behind the counter, wearing a green apron with a name tag. She looked worn out, her nails short and unpolished as she wiped down a table with a dirty rag. Our eyes met. She froze. I was in a tailored suit, my laptop open to a complex design. I looked like everything she had been raised to be, and she looked like someone she would have once sneered at. She didn't wave. She didn't speak. She just looked down and started scrubbing the table harder, as if trying to erase the sight of me. I finished my meeting and left a $50 bill in the tip jar on my way out. It was the only money I ever gave any of them. My parents moved into a small rental with brown carpeting and thin walls. My father found some part-time consulting work, but his reputation was ruined. My mother sold her jewelry on eBay. The family grapevine, what was left of it, told me they blamed me for everything. Their ungrateful daughter had abandoned them in their time of need. They played the victims, but no one was buying tickets to their pity party anymore. While they were complaining, I was building. The Green Spire project was completed ahead of schedule and under budget. It won a national award for sustainable design. My face was on the cover of Architectural Review. During the interview, the journalist asked me, "What was the inspiration? This building feels so resilient." I smiled. It was inspired by the fundamental need for shelter, I said, and the strength you discover when you're forced to build your own. I didn't mention them. They were not a part of my success story. They were just the rubble I'd had to clear away to lay my own foundation. 6 months later, the November rains had returned to Boston. I was standing on the rooftop terrace of the Green Spire. From up here, the city spread out like a glittering circuit board. I looked toward Beacon Hill. Somewhere in the dark, my parents were in their little rental, probably watching TV, probably miserable. I searched for the old anger, the familiar sting of betrayal. But it was gone. I didn't hate them. Hate is a connection. It's an investment of energy, and I had no more energy to invest in them. I felt nothing. They were a storm that had passed. You don't waste time being angry at a storm. You just rebuild, stronger. They consumed, I whispered to the wind. I created. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Daniel, my friend from the nonprofit in Philadelphia. Hey, superstar, we just got funding for 3 more Nexus projects. You in? I smiled and typed back instantly. Always. Send me the site plans. I put my phone away and looked out at the horizon. I wasn't looking down at my past anymore. I was looking forward. The best revenge, I said softly, isn't tearing something down. It's building something that they can never touch. I turned from the ledge and walked toward the door leading back inside. I had work to do. I had blueprints to draw. I had a future to design, and the blueprint was finally entirely my own.